Businesses are going bankrupt in Canada at a rapid pace, and you need to prepare for what is coming, which is mass layoffs. We are already seeing that the labor market is destabilizing. There is plenty of evidence in that when you dig beneath the data and you look at things like EI claims, which are just going up and up and up and are going up at a very rapid rate. You've also got business insolvencies that are rising at a massive rate right now. They're actually getting up to levels not seen since the global financial crisis. So with these levels in business insolvencies, it's important to understand the effects of that. Obviously, if businesses are going bankrupt, that means people are losing their jobs. That means debts are being defaulted on. That means creditors aren't being paid, all which affects a monopoly of banks in Canada, because there are only mainly 5 big banks in Canada, and those banks essentially will be impacted and affected by all these business insolvencies that are happening. You've also got the secondary effects of the people being laid off because the businesses have gone bankrupt. Obviously, if a lot of businesses are going bankrupt, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out that people are being laid off, people are losing their jobs. And we know that right now we are essentially in a depression when it comes to the labor market. It is very, very difficult in order to find a job. You've seen the career fairs all over the country, from Calgary to Toronto, where there is just lines and lines of people and the jobs just aren't there anymore. The thing is, spending is down right now because so much money is being ate up by people having to repay their debt. Interest rates have gone up. They haven't gone up to really historic highs, but they've gone up to historic highs for the past 2 decades. And because of the amount of debt in the Canadian economy, household debt being one of the highest in the world, private business debt being one of the highest in the world, those interest rates really start to pinch. The problem is the Bank of Canada has even admitted that they cannot diverge from the Federal Reserve that much when it comes to their policy interest rate. The reason for this is because if the interest rate differential is too different from the Federal Reserve, then that means that why on earth are people going to buy Canadian dollars? And that means people will sell Canadian dollars and they'll buy US dollars, which means it puts downward pressure on the currency, which means that it puts upward pressure on inflation, because a lot of those things in the CPI basket are driven by fluctuations in the currency, especially things like food that have seen particularly large amounts of inflation. And we've already seen that right now Canadians cannot afford to eat. Canadians can't afford food right now. So what on earth is it going to be like if the currency drops even more? We already have a massive amount, over 20% of Canadians that are suffering from food insecurity right now, which is just an unbelievable percentage. And it really echoes what I've been saying all along, which is we're in a silent depression. I'm calling it a silent depression because nobody else is going to call it a depression. So it's a depression in silence because a lot of people are just simply not going to understand what's going on. It's going to be very different person to person. Somebody who has a job, they might be humming along and doing just fine if they're renting, compared to somebody with a variable rate mortgage who just lost their job, might be on the brink of bankruptcy.
Unable to afford a lawyer, she's now awaiting a default judgment as she faces bankruptcy.
You literally go from owning a property and having a job with a great income to being faced with homelessness all in less than a year.
And that is a massive divergence right now, which is between different people. So you have a lot of people that are struggling in the economy. Now, a lot of people can lay the feet of this at the Bank of Canada and say that it's the Bank of Canada's fault interest rates are so high. But really, it's the consumer for getting in so much debt. The consumer is in a massive amount of debt, on par with the government debt. So the consumer can't even say, oh yeah, the government has too much debt, because they have just about the same amount of debt. And then you look at the private businesses and it just gets even worse. The private business debt, one of the highest in the world in Canada, is just crazy, absolutely crazy. So with all this debt, obviously interest rates, they have a massive effect, and those effects have a lag. Business bankruptcies, that's why you're seeing that start to take off. Think about it. Interest rates, they haven't changed. They're actually going up slightly on longer term duration. inflation because of bonds. So you're just seeing the pressures pile up, which is going to just create more and more business bankruptcies, which is going to create more layoffs. And even if a business isn't going bankrupt, it means their margins are compressed as they have to allocate more and more money to servicing their debt. And we know they have a massive amount of debt, especially businesses in Alberta are particularly exposed to this because of multiple boom and bust cycles over the past 10, 15 years. That's why it kind of makes me laugh that you have this whole moving to Alberta drive that's going on right now and this kind of Alberta bubble, let's call it. But that does not spell good things for the future. Obviously, if businesses have massive amounts of debt, they're allocating more money to servicing their debt. That means that they might have to cut employees to keep their margins because essentially, obviously, it's going to be eating away at their margins, possibly even turning their margins negative, which is definitely what's happened with restaurants, which is why you've seen so many restaurants that have closed down, if not gone bankrupt. But a lot of them are just closing their doors because it makes no sense. They have so much debt that they're just taking on more debt. They're bleeding cash. They're not making any money. You might as well shut the business at that point. So you can now see how the Canadian debt bubble is not just the housing bubble, it's layered into the private business sector. It's also government debt as well. But here's the thing, only one of those can print money, and that is the government. The government can print money via deficits by issuing government bonds, as long as there's buyers out there, of course. And we have seen bond prices fluctuate, but they're still at a relatively low level, and that's why we see a yield curve inversion. And that's not because the bond market is predicting good things in the future. It's the complete opposite, and this is the most extreme yield curve inversion that we've seen since the 1990s. And the 1990s recession in Canada arguably was the longest and worst recession in Canadian history. So it doesn't say good things. And the Canadian recession that happened in the 90s also was centered around a real estate speculative bubble.
To be going from bad to worse in Canada's troubled housing industry. New figures out tonight show last month was the slowest month for house construction in 13 years. The CBC's Neil MacDonald now on the slump that just won't end.
It would be hard to imagine better conditions for buying a home. Prices in most parts of Canada have been falling steadily since the late 1980s. There are plenty of homes from which to choose.
And, you know, Canada is not immune to the effects of population growth. The effects of population growth are actually now making the economy worse, whereas over the past 5 to 10 years, they've actually seen benefits of population growth. It gets to a point where the economy can no longer handle it anymore, and the debt payments and the debt amounts have got so large that the economy almost becomes unproductive, and the workers in the economy also become unproductive, which is why you see productivity that is going down, which is why you see the standard of living going down. I mean, I created this chart which clearly shows you when you adjust to the shadow stats numbers for inflation, wages have been massively negative, and we've actually been in a stagflationary environment for the past over a decade now. Little do people even understand or know. It's just got so extreme over the past 4 years that people have noticed, because obviously the amount of inflation that we've seen and the divergence, as you can see on the chart, has been so extreme that people have actually begun to notice. But what's happened over the past 10, 15 years is people have filled the hole in their income with debt. Now, obviously, that is a bad long-term solution, and it's a great solution for short-term. And that's why we saw the economy, which kind of just ticked along for the past 10, 15 years. And now we're seeing it really start to crumble. And if you take away the added population growth as well, the economy looks even worse, and the economy can't even actually benefit off that population growth anyway. It just distorts the GDP numbers that we see. So Canada is in big trouble right now when it comes to the economy. The only way that the ship is going to do a U-turn right now is if the government does what they did in 2020, which ultimately would cause massive pain over the next 5 years as we've just seen happen over the past 4 years. So I don't think that is a solution. I just think that that might be likely what's going to happen, especially if this turns into a global economic recession, which looks highly likely when you look at yield curve inversions in the United States, in the UK, in Germany. And we've already seen some countries like the UK and Germany in Europe that have been drifting in and out of recession right now. So there is major problems. There is definitely a silent depression that has started this year in Canada, and who knows where it's going to end. But we will continue to monitor it, and hopefully at some point there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Let me know what you think of this video, and if you're looking for another video to watch, I would highly recommend that you check out that video there. If you're looking for a VPN, you know where to go to get around the censorship. Go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. I will see you in the next one.